In a room crowded with golden glances and silent judgments, a woman trapped in the image of her own fragility is approached by a stranger who claims he can fix what doctors deemed irreversible, but what starts as an improbable promise ignites a silent war where every attempt to stand up becomes a direct threat to the empire of a man determined to keep her immobile, even if it means sabotaging, lying, and destroying anyone who dares to give her hope back. The tears of Ava Jenkins mingled with the rain pounding the windows of the 32nd floor. From her wheelchair, she watched the lights of New York City twinkle like stars mocking her own darkness. 2 years had passed since the accident that had shattered her spine, and with it, all hope of ever feeling her legs again. The heiress to the biggest hotel fortune in America had lost more than the ability to walk. She had lost all faith in miracles. "Miss Jenkins," a deep voice murmured behind her, "I know you can walk again." Ava spun her chair around sharply. Facing her was Ethan Black, the hotel's night janitor, a 34-year-old man whose hands, calloused from work, contrasted with the gentleness of his brown eyes. His navy blue uniform was spotless, but there was something in his gaze that spoke of battles fought in silence. "Excuse me?" Ava raised an eyebrow, a mix of disbelief and irritation. "The most prestigious doctors in the country have confirmed my injury is irreversible, and you, a janitor, are coming to promise me the impossible?" Ethan took a step closer, his hands clasped in front of his chest. "My daughter, Lily, walks today because I never accepted that she couldn't. The doctors said the same words about her 5 years ago. Cerebral palsy, no hope. But today she runs in the park like any 8-year-old kid." Silence stretched between them, like an invisible bridge. Ava studied the face of this man, who dared to challenge science with something as fragile as hope. There was something in his conviction that disturbed her. It wasn't the desperation of a huckster looking for money. It was the serenity of someone who had seen the impossible become reality. "Why?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because I recognized that look," Ethan replied, gesturing gently toward her eyes. "It's the same one I had when I carried Lily in my arms, wondering if she would ever feel her own legs, the pain hidden behind the resignation. But I also see something else, the spark that hasn't gone out yet." Ava felt as if an invisible hand had touched her heart. No one had seen past her wheelchair in 2 years. To everyone, she was the disabled heiress, an object of pity and compassionate whispers. This man saw her as whole. "The exercises," Ethan continued, "they aren't what you know. It's not about physical strength. It's about reconnecting what fear has disconnected. Lily didn't walk because she strengthened her muscles. She walked because she learned her spirit was stronger than her diagnosis." "What if you're wrong?" Ava murmured, feeling a strange tremor in her chest. "What if you're just giving me false hope?" Ethan smiled, and for the first time in 2 years, Ava saw something she had forgotten: compassion without pity. "Then I will have spent time with the bravest woman I know, reminding her that bravery isn't measured by what we can do, but by what we dare to try." Behind them, a shadow moved in the hallway. David Vega, the family's business partner and administrator of their charitable foundations, had heard every word from the ajar door. His eyes narrowed as he watched the scene. The possibility of Ava regaining her mobility represented a direct threat to his plans. For 2 years he had managed her fortune under the pretense of protecting an incapacitated woman. His network of fun diversion depended on keeping her exactly where she was, dependent and isolated. "I need some time to think," Ava finally said, although something inside her had already begun to stir. Ethan nodded. "Time is the only thing we can't get back, Mum, but the decision will always be yours." He turned toward the door but stopped. "Lily will be at the park tomorrow at 4. If you want to see what's possible, we'll be waiting for you." When Ethan left, Ava remained motionless in front of the window. For the first time in years, she had felt something akin to hope, but she had also felt fear. Not of failure, but of what it might mean to have hope again. David emerged from the shadows, his smile perfectly calibrated. "Ava, my dear, I hope you're not seriously considering the fantasies of that employee." She looked at him, noticing for the first time something cold in his grey eyes. "Were you listening?" "I worry about you," he replied, stepping closer to touch her shoulder. "That man is taking advantage of your vulnerability. I've looked into him. A desperate single father, no formal education, working night shifts to survive. Do you really believe he has the answers that the country's best specialists don't?" Ava pulled her shoulder away from his touch. "I don't know, David, but for the first time in 2 years, someone has spoken to me as if I'm something more than a victim." "That's exactly what he wants you to think." David gritted his teeth, keeping his tone calm. Tomorrow I'll speak to security to make sure that man keeps his distance. You will do no such thing. Ava's voice had a firmness he hadn't heard in years. I am not a prisoner, David. I can still make my own decisions. David nodded slowly, but something dangerous flickered in his eyes. Of course, my dear, I just want to protect you. That night, as Ava lay in bed, Ethan's words echoed in her mind. The spark that hasn't gone out yet. Could it be true? Was there really a part of her that refused to give up? In his small apartment, Ethan watched his daughter Lily as she slept. Her thin legs rested peacefully under the sheets, but he remembered when they were just dead weight. He remembered the sleepless nights, the endless exercises, the moments when he himself had lost faith. But he also remembered the day Lily took her first step and how that small victory had changed everything. Dad, Lily murmured in her sleep, is the pretty lady going to walk like me? Ethan smiled in the darkness. His daughter had inherited a special intuition, as if she could see the pain in others and felt the compulsion to heal. If she wants it as much as we want it for her, little one. If she wants it as much as we do. In his private office, David urgently reviewed financial documents. The funds he had been siphoning from the charitable foundations amounted to millions. His scheme depended entirely on Ava remaining legally incapacitated and emotionally dependent on him. If she regained her independence, he would not only lose access to her fortune, but an investigation would reveal years of embezzlement. He picked up his phone and dialed a number. I need complete information on Ethan Black. Everything. His past, his debts, his vulnerabilities, and I want it fast. Fate had set in motion forces that none of the three protagonists could fully imagine. Ava was torn between hope and fear. Ethan was preparing for a battle he didn't know was coming, and David was beginning to weave a web of lies and manipulation that threatened to destroy any possibility of healing. But in the heart of the city, as night gave way to dawn, something had changed irreversibly. The seed of hope had been planted, and like all powerful seeds, it would grow despite the darkness. Would you have the courage to believe in the impossible if someone offered you the hope you thought was lost forever? Tell me from where you are following this story of courage and determination. Chapter 2. The park was bustling with the typical life of a Sunday afternoon in Detroit. Families strolled among the trees, vendors offered hot dogs and ice cream, and the air filled with children's laughter. Ava arrived in her electric wheelchair, accompanied by John, her personal driver, who was pushing a second, lighter manual chair. From a distance, she saw Ethan sitting on a bench watching a girl with curly black hair who was running freely among other children. Lily had the brightest smile Ava had seen in years, and the way she moved was completely natural, without the slightest trace of the limitation that had supposedly defined her early years. Is that her? Ava asked when she approached the bench. Ethan nodded, his face lighting up at the sight of his daughter. Lily, come here. I want you to meet someone special. The girl ran toward them, her cheeks rosy from the exercise. Upon seeing Ava in her wheelchair, she showed no discomfort or pity. Instead, she studied her with genuine warm curiosity. Hi, Lily said with a shy smile. Dad says you're very brave. Ava felt a lump in her throat. Brave? I don't feel very brave lately. My dad says bravery isn't when you don't have fear, Lily explained, with the simple wisdom of children. It's when you're scared, but you do the hard things anyway. Lily's right, Ethan interjected, sitting on the bench next to Ava. When she was 3, the doctors told us she would never coordinate her movements enough to walk. They said her brain couldn't send the right signals to her legs. But what happened? Ava asked, fascinated despite her skepticism. Dad never stopped believing in me, Lily replied simply. Every day we did exercises. At first I couldn't even move a single toe, but Dad said miracles take time. Ethan took his daughter's hands in his. It wasn't easy. There were nights when she cried from frustration, and I cried with her. But there was something inside her that refused to give up, and that taught me that maybe doctors can see what's broken, but they can't always see what's waiting to heal. Ava watched the interaction between father and daughter and felt a pang of envy. Not envy for Lily's ability to walk, but for the unwavering faith Ethan had in his daughter. No one had looked at her with that kind of conviction in 2 years. Can you show me? Ava asked softly. The exercises? Ethan looked at her, surprised. Are you sure? They're not like traditional physical therapy. They're different. I'm tired of traditional, Ava replied, with a determination that surprised her. I'm tired of being told what I can't do. For the next hour, Ethan guided her through a series of exercises that seemed more like meditation than physical therapy. It wasn't about forcing movement, but about reconnecting the mind with parts of the body that had been declared dead. Lily participated happily, demonstrating some of the movements she had learned years ago. "Close your eyes," Ethan instructed, "and instead of thinking about what you can't feel, think about what you can. The warmth of the sun on your face, the wind moving your hair, your heart beating. Your body is more alive than you think." Ava followed his instructions, and for a fleeting moment, she thought she felt a small sensation in her left leg. So subtle it could have been imagination, but so real that she opened her eyes abruptly. "Did you feel something?" Ethan asked, watching her expression of astonishment. "Maybe," she murmured, "or maybe it was just hope disguised as a sensation." "Sometimes," Ethan said with a smile, "there's no difference between the two." Meanwhile, 2 blocks away, David Vega was watching the scene from his black Mercedes with tinted windows. His private investigator had provided him with devastating information about Ethan Black, a history of financial problems, 3 jobs lost in 2 years, and a pending lawsuit for his daughter's unpaid medical expenses. It was perfect. David dialed his lawyer's number. "Prepare a restraining order. I want Ethan Black to stay at least 1,000 feet away from Ava Jenkins, and find a way to frame him as a threat to her safety." That afternoon, when Ava returned to her penthouse, she found David waiting for her with legal documents and a theatrically perfect expression of concern. "Ava, it pained me to do this, but I had no choice," he said, extending the papers. "Ethan Black has a history of financial instability and erratic behavior. My investigation shows he's been terminated from several jobs for inappropriate conduct." Ava read the documents with increasing disbelief. "A restraining order? David, what have you done?" "Protected you," he replied firmly. "That man is taking advantage of your emotional vulnerability. Look at these financial reports. He owes thousands in medical bills. Don't you see that you represent an easy solution to his economic problems?" "I can't believe you did this without consulting me." Ava felt betrayed and furious. "He didn't ask me for money. Not once." "Not yet." David moved closer, his voice taking on a more manipulative tone. "But he will, they always do. And by then, you'll be too emotionally invested to see the truth." Ava looked out the window at the city spreading out before her. For the first time in years, she had felt something like hope, and now David was smothering it with suspicion and legal papers. "Cancel the restraining order," she said finally. "I can't do that," David replied. "It's already been processed. And frankly, I think it's for the best. For my best or for yours." The question came out before Ava could stop it. David looked at her with a coldness she had never seen before. "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means that for 2 years you have made every important decision about my life, my finances, my medical treatments, my social activities, and now you decide who can and cannot talk to me. I'm starting to wonder if you really care about my well-being or about maintaining control." David's mask began to crack. "I have taken care of you when no one else would. I have sacrificed my time, my energy, my personal life to make sure you have everything you need." "What you think I need," Ava corrected. "But you have never asked me what I want." That night, Ethan received the legal notice in his small apartment. Lily was doing her homework at the kitchen table when he opened the official envelope. "What's that, Dad?" she asked, noticing his somber expression. It's complicated, little one." Ethan sat heavily in a chair. The restraining order not only forbade him from approaching Ava, but also resulted in his immediate dismissal from the hotel for inappropriate conduct with guests. "Is it because of the pretty lady?" Lily put down her pencil and went to her father. "Does someone not want you to help her walk?" Ethan hugged his daughter, feeling the weight of the injustice. "Sometimes, Lily, there are people who benefit when others can't fend for themselves, and those people will do anything to keep things the way they are." "But that's not right," Lily protested with childish indignation. "If she wants to walk, we should help her." "You're right, my love, but sometimes doing the right thing is more complicated than it should be." Meanwhile, in her penthouse, Ava had made a decision. If David thought he could completely control her life, he was very wrong. That night, she made a phone call that would change everything. "Chloe, it's Ava Jenkins. I need you to do something for me, and I need it to be completely confidential." Chloe Peterson had been her best friend before the accident, and one of the few people who didn't treat her as if she were made of glass. She was also an investigative journalist, specializing in corporate fraud. "Of course, Ava. What do you need?" "I want you to investigate David Vega. Everything. His finances, his businesses, his connections, and I want you to investigate the foundations he administers on my behalf." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Do you suspect anything specific?" "I suspect I've been very blind for 2 years, Ava replied, "and I think it's time for me to open my eyes." The silent war had begun. David believed he had neutralized the threat posed by Ethan, but he had completely underestimated the determination of a woman who was rediscovering her own strength. And Ethan, although legally and temporarily defeated, was not the type of man to give up when he believed in a just cause. The question was, who would move the next piece in this dangerous game of human chess? If you were the one to discover that the people closest to you have been controlling your life for your own good, would you have the courage to fight for your independence, even if it meant facing painful truths? Chapter 3. 3 weeks after the restraining order, Ava had developed a routine of silent rebellion. Every morning after David reviewed her agenda and left for his business meetings, she would sneak out of her penthouse in her manual wheelchair, avoiding the official driver and taking taxis to places where she could practice the exercises Ethan had taught her. Her favorite place was a small church in Brooklyn, where the elderly caretaker, Mrs. Thompson, had allowed her to use a back room during the quiet afternoon hours. Mrs. Thompson had lost her own son in a car accident years ago and saw in Ava the daughter she had never had. "My dear," Mrs. Thompson would say while helping her with breathing exercises, "miracles don't come to those who wait for them sitting down. They come to those who get up and look for them, even if it's with their soul when their body can't." It was during one of these secret sessions that Ava felt something extraordinary. As she concentrated on sending thoughts of warmth to her legs, she felt a definite sensation in her right foot. It wasn't imagination this time. It was real, small, but undeniably real. "Mrs. Thompson," she whispered, tears rolling down her cheeks, "I think I felt my foot." The old woman crossed herself and smiled. The good Lord never abandons his children who fight with faith. That same afternoon, as she was returning to the hotel, Ava saw a familiar figure in the small park across the street from the building. Lily was playing alone on the swings, while Ethan watched her from a bench, carefully maintaining the legal distance required by the restraining order. Without a second thought, Ava steered her chair toward the park. Technically, there was nothing in the order that forbade her from approaching him. "Hi, Lily," she called when she was close. The girl ran off the swing and approached with her radiant smile. "Pretty lady, have you been practicing the exercises?" Ethan immediately stood up, clearly conflicted between his desire to approach and his legal obligation to stay away. "I can't talk to you," he said from a distance. "The restraining order." "The order says you can't approach me," Ava replied with a cunning smile. "It doesn't say anything about me not being able to approach you." Ethan couldn't help but smile at her logic. "Have you been okay? Have you had a chance to practice?" "Every day," she replied, moving her chair until she was barely a yard away from him. "And Ethan, today I felt something. In my right foot. It was small, but I'm sure it was real." Ethan's eyes lit up. "That's incredible. That's exactly how it started with Lily. Small sparks of connection that gradually turned into a fire." "Dad," Lily interrupted, "why can't you be close? Is it because someone doesn't want the lady to get better?" The innocence of the question struck both adults. Ethan knelt down to be at his daughter's level. "Sometimes, Lily, people are afraid of change, and when they're afraid, they do things that hurt others to protect themselves. But that's cowardly," Lily declared with the moral firmness that only children possess. "You're right," Ava agreed. "It is cowardly." For the next few minutes, they held a careful conversation, with Ethan technically complying with the restraining order, but providing valuable guidance. He explained more advanced techniques, ways to deepen the mind-body connection, and above all, he reminded her that recovery was not just physical. The hardest part, he told her, isn't making the body remember how to move, it's making the mind remember how to hope. "What do you mean?" "For 2 years, your mind has protected itself from disappointment by not expecting anything. It's built walls around hope, because hope hurts when it's broken. But to fully heal, you have to be willing to tear down those walls and risk feeling everything. The hope, the possibility of failure, the fear, the excitement, everything." Ava looked into his eyes, and for the first time, she realized she was seeing Ethan not just as a healer or a guide, but as a man who had risked everything for the promise of helping her, who had lost his job and faced public humiliation, but who still believed in her. "Ethan," she said softly, "why are you doing this? Why do you care so much?" He hesitated, and she could see a new vulnerability in his eyes. "Because," he began slowly, "when I saw you that night at the hotel, I didn't see a woman in a wheelchair. I saw someone who had lost hope, and I know exactly how that feels. When Lily was sick, there were times when I also wanted to give up, and if someone hadn't appeared in my life to remind me that miracles are possible, well, Lily wouldn't be running in this park today." "Who was it?" Ava asked. "Who helped you not to give up?" Ethan smiled, looking at his daughter. "A nurse named Carmen. She was old, wise, and refused to accept final diagnoses. She taught me that true love doesn't accept defeat, not even when all the evidence says it should. What happened to her? She died last year, cancer. But before she died, she made me promise that I would pass on what she had taught me, that I would help others find the hope they had lost. Ava felt a deep connection that went beyond gratitude or admiration. This man wasn't just risking everything for her. He had found his purpose in life by helping others find theirs. "Ethan," she said, extending her hand toward him, "there's something you need to know. I've hired an investigator to look into David's businesses. I think there's more to this restraining order than it seems." Ethan took her hand, and they both felt an electricity that had nothing to do with physical healing. "What have you found?" "I don't have all the details yet, but Chloe has discovered irregularities in the foundations he administers. Large sums of money that have been transferred to accounts that don't appear in any public records." "That would explain a lot," Ethan said thoughtfully. "A man willing to use the legal system to separate us isn't doing it just out of concern. He's doing it out of fear. Fear of what? Of losing control. If you regain your physical and emotional independence, you'll also regain control over your fortune. And if he's been stealing..." The conversation was interrupted by Ava's phone. It was John, her driver. "Miss Jenkins, Mr. Vega is asking for you. He's returned early from his meeting and let's just say he's not happy that you're not at home." Ava looked at Ethan with frustration. "I have to go, but Ethan, don't give up. What we're doing is more important than any of us initially imagined." "Will we see each other again?" he asked, and there was something in his voice that went beyond professional concern. "Yes," she replied, with a determination that surprised her. "And the next time we see each other, I promise it will be on my own terms, not David's." That night in her penthouse, Ava faced David's controlled fury. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "John says you left without an escort, without protection, without even reporting your destination." "I went to a church," she replied calmly. "Since when do I need permission to pray?" "You don't need permission to pray. You need protection to go out alone, especially now that man is lurking around the area." "Ethan isn't lurking. He was with his daughter in a public park, and technically I approached him, not the other way around." David stepped closer, his eyes showing a rage he no longer bothered to fully disguise. "Ava, listen to me very carefully. That man is dangerous, not just for your physical safety, but for your mental stability. He's filling your head with impossible fantasies that will only cause you more pain when they inevitably fail." "What if they don't fail?" she asked, looking him directly in the eyes. "What if he's right? What if I can recover?" For a moment, David hesitated, and Ava saw something in his expression that alarmed her. It wasn't concern, it was panic. "That's impossible," he said quickly. "The best doctors in the world have confirmed your diagnosis. The best doctors in the world once said that Lily Black would never walk, and today I saw her run." "That's different." David turned away, beginning to pace the room. "Cases of cerebral palsy can sometimes improve with intensive therapy. Your spinal cord injury is completely different." "How can you be so sure it's impossible?" Ava pressed. "Why are you so determined to make me believe I'll never recover?" David stopped abruptly. "Because I love you," he said, but the words sounded more like a threat than a declaration. "And I can't bear to see you suffer another devastating disappointment." Ava studied him carefully. "Do you love me, David? Or do you love what I represent? What is that supposed to mean?" "It means I'm starting to realize that maybe your protection and your love look a lot like control and possession." That night, after David left, visibly disturbed, Ava exercised privately in her room. And for the second time, she felt sensations in both feet. Small, inconsistent, but real. She realized that her body wasn't the only thing waking up. Her heart was also remembering how to feel, how to hope, how to love. And the face she saw when she closed her eyes was no longer that of the defeated woman she had been for 2 years. It was the face of a woman who was falling in love, not just with the possibility of walking again, but with a man who had risked everything to remind her that miracles exist for those who dare to believe in them. The question was, would she have the courage to fight for both miracles, or would the forces working against her be too powerful to overcome? As someone who has felt a deep and unexpected connection with another person, do you believe that true love can really heal wounds that go beyond the physical? Tell me about your experience with the transformative power of love from where you are following this story. Chapter 4. Chloe Peterson arrived at Ava's penthouse on a rainy Tuesday, carrying a box of files that would change everything. Her 3-week investigation had uncovered a labyrinth of corruption that surpassed Ava's worst suspicions. "You need to sit down for this," Chloe said, although she immediately realized the irony of her words. "Well, you need to mentally prepare yourself." Ava closed the door to her study and turned on the sound system to mask their conversation. What have you found? Chloe opened the first file. David Vega has been siphoning funds from your charitable foundations for the last 18 months. Not small amounts, Ava. We're talking about $12 million. Ava felt as if she had been physically struck. 12 million? How could I not have noticed? Because he controlled all the information that reached you. All the financial reports went through his hands first. He showed you edited versions that hid the transfers. Chloe spread out bank documents. But here's the most chilling part. Much of that money was supposed to be for rehab centers, for people with spinal cord injuries. He's stealing money meant for people like me, Ava murmured, the betrayal cutting deeper than any scalpel. There's more, Chloe continued somberly. I found evidence that he's been bribing doctors to maintain pessimistic diagnoses about your condition, not to physically harm you, but to ensure you remain legally dependent on him as a financial guardian. Ava was silent for several minutes, processing the magnitude of the betrayal. The man she had trusted completely for 2 years had not only stolen her money, but had actively sabotaged any chance of recovery. What about the restraining order against Ethan? Completely fabricated. The reports about his supposed financial instability were exaggerated or invented. Yes, he has medical debts from his daughter's treatment, but nothing to suggest dangerous behavior or dishonest economic motivations. Chloe opened another file. But Ava, there's something else. Something that could be very dangerous. What? David has been in contact with a private clinic in Switzerland, a clinic that specializes in irreversible procedures to ensure permanent dependence for patients with spinal injuries. Ava's world stopped. Are you saying he's planning? I'm saying that if your recovery continues, he might take desperate measures to ensure it's permanently impossible. That afternoon, Ava made the bravest decision of her life. She called Ethan and asked him to meet her at the church in Brooklyn, restraining order or not. When she arrived, she found Ethan waiting for her with Lily, both clearly worried by the urgent tone of her call. Ethan, she began without preamble, I need to tell you everything, and I need you to know that what we're doing is more dangerous than we imagined. She told him about Chloe's investigation, about the stolen money, about the bribed doctors, and finally, about the Swiss clinic. Ethan listened in silence, his expression growing darker with each revelation. There's something else, Ava added, her voice trembling. Ethan, I think I'm falling in love with you, and I know it's complicated and risky and maybe crazy, but I needed you to know before things get worse. Ethan moved closer, taking her hands. Ava, I'm already in love with you. I have been since that first night when I saw you in the window, not as a victim, but as a warrior who had simply forgotten how to fight. They kissed then, a kiss that contained all the pain, hope, fear, and determination they had shared over the past few weeks. When they separated, they both knew they had crossed a line from which there was no return. What are we going to do? Ava asked. We're going to fight, Ethan replied with a firmness that surprised her. But first, we need evidence we can legally use against David, and we need to ensure your safety. I already have evidence, Ava said. Chloe has documented everything. But Ethan, he has powerful connections, judges, politicians, other businessmen. It won't be easy. Dad? Lily interrupted, who had been listening with the seriousness of someone much older than 8 years old. Does the bad man want to hurt the pretty lady? Ethan knelt before his daughter. Yes, little one, but we're not going to let that happen. Then we have to be smarter than him, Lily declared with determination. Like in stories, the good guys always win when they're smarter than the bad guys. Her innocent words gave Ethan an idea. Lily's right. David thinks he controls all the information and all the pieces of the game, but there's something he doesn't know. What? That you've been practicing the exercises in secret, and that you've been having real sensations in your legs. Ava nodded. In fact, yesterday I felt something in both legs at the same time, and this morning, for the first time in 2 years, I could slightly move the big toe on my right foot. Ethan's eyes lit up. That's exactly what we need. We're going to give David a demonstration he'll never expect. What do you have in mind? He's been working under the assumption that your recovery is impossible, but if we could arrange a situation where you demonstrate real movement in front of neutral witnesses, the bribed doctors would say it's a muscle spasm or an involuntary reflex. Not if we get doctors he can't bribe. Doctors from outside the country, international specialists who have no connection to him. Chloe, who had arrived while they were talking, joined the conversation. I have contacts in the US, specialists in spinal cord injuries who have seen cases of partial recovery. They could come for an independent evaluation. But we need more than that, Ethan said thoughtfully. We need David to incriminate himself, to admit his actions in a situation where he can be recorded. How? Ethan looked at Ava with an expression that mixed love and determination. You're going to pretend you're considering the procedure in Switzerland. You're going to tell him you've lost all hope in natural recovery and that you want to ensure you never have to go through the disappointment of believing you can get better again. You want me to tell him I want to make my paralysis permanent? I want him to believe you've been completely defeated, that his plan has worked. And when he's convinced he has total control, that's when he'll make the mistake we need to destroy him. Ava thought about the proposal for several minutes. It was risky, dangerous, and would require the performance of her life, but it was also her only chance to defeat David and reclaim her freedom. I'll do it, she said finally. But Ethan, if something goes wrong— Nothing is going to go wrong, he interrupted, although she could see the worry in his eyes. And Ava, no matter what happens, I want you to know that these last few months with you have been the most meaningful of my life. For me too, she replied, and they kissed again, this kiss more desperate than the last, as if they both knew it might be their last. That night, Ava returned to her penthouse and called David. David, she said, injecting defeat into her voice, I need to talk to you about something important, about my future. Of course, my dear. What's on your mind? I've been thinking about what you said, about false hope and the need to accept reality. I think you're right. There was a pause. What exactly do you mean? I want information about that clinic in Switzerland, the one you mentioned, the one that can ensure I never again have to go through the agony of believing I can get better. David couldn't hide the satisfaction in his voice. I'm so proud of you, Ava. I know this must be a very difficult decision, but it's the right one. Can you arrange a consultation? Of course. In fact, I've already been in contact with them. They can do the procedure next week. Ava closed her eyes, memorizing every word. Thank you, David. I don't know what I'd do without you. You'll never have to find out, he replied, and for the first time, Ava heard the threat that had always been hidden in his words of protection. The trap was set. The endgame had begun. And in a week, one of them would have won everything, while the other would have lost more than they ever imagined possible. If you discovered that someone you trusted completely has been manipulating your life for years, would you have the courage to risk everything to unmask them, knowing that failure could cost you not only your independence, but also the love you just found? Chapter 5. The longest week of Ava's life began with a phone call that changed everything. The American specialists Chloe had contacted arrived in New York 2 days earlier than expected, and their initial evaluation of Ava was devastatingly hopeful. Miss Jenkins, said Dr. Sarah Williams, one of the world's most respected neurologists in spinal injuries, what you are experiencing is extraordinary. According to your original medical records, your injury should have resulted in complete permanent paralysis. However, our tests show active neuronal reconnection. Ava was lying on the examination table of the private clinic Chloe had secured for the secret evaluation. Ethan and Lily waited in the next room, both nervous but hopeful. What exactly does that mean? Ava asked. It means your nervous system is repairing itself in ways that medical science is just beginning to understand. The exercises you have been practicing, combined with what I can only describe as extraordinary determination, have created new neurological pathways. Doctor. Williams showed the MRI images on a screen. Look here. This bright line indicates neurological activity where there should be none according to the original diagnosis. And here you can see that muscles that should be completely atrophied are showing signs of regeneration. Will I be able to walk again? With the right and continued treatment, I estimate you have a 70% chance of recovering significant mobility. Maybe not like before the accident, but definitely enough for an independent life. Ava started to cry, but this time they were tears of validation. Everything Ethan had said was true. Everything they had fought for was possible. There's something else, the doctor continued. The medications you've been taking for the past 2 years, some of them are designed to suppress neurological regeneration. What? They are legitimate pain management medications, but in the doses they have been administering, they have been actively sabotaging any chance of natural recovery. Ava felt a cold fury settle in her chest. David had not only stolen her money and manipulated her life, but he had been systematically drugging her to keep her paralyzed. How long would it take for me to regain movement if I stopped these medications and continued the therapy I've been doing? With the dedication you have shown so far, you could be walking with assistance in 3 or 4 weeks. When Ethan heard the results, his reaction was a mixture of jubilation and horror. Jubilation at the confirmation that his methods worked, horror at the confirmation of how far David had gone to prevent Ava's recovery. This changes the plan, Ethan said after the doctors left. It's no longer just about unmasking David. It's about protecting you from someone who has been systematically poisoning you. Chloe, who had been documenting everything, had even more alarming news. Ava, my contacts in the government have confirmed that David has accelerated the arrangements for the procedure in Switzerland. The flight is scheduled for tomorrow night. Tomorrow? Ava felt panic. But the plan was to get him to admit his crimes before. The plan has changed because he has changed the timeline, Ethan interrupted. I think he suspects something. As if his words were prophetic, Ava's phone rang. It was David. My dear. His voice had an urgency she had never heard before. An extraordinary opportunity has come up. The clinic in Switzerland can receive you tomorrow night instead of next week. I think we should seize this opportunity. Ava looked at Ethan and Chloe, seeing her own fear reflected in their faces. It's very sudden, David. Can't we wait a few more days? No, my dear. This doctor is extremely difficult to get. If we don't take this appointment, we could wait months for another opportunity. I understand, Ava said slowly. What time does the flight leave? At 10 o'clock at night from the international airport. I'll take care of all the arrangements. When she hung up, the three of them were silent for several minutes. We can't let him take you to Switzerland, Ethan finally said. Once you're on that plane, you'll be completely at his mercy. But if I don't go, he'll know I suspect something, and then he could take even more desperate measures. Chloe stood up and started pacing the room. We need to accelerate our plan. We have to get him to admit his crimes tonight, before the flight. How? Lily? Ethan said suddenly. Lily could be the key. What do you mean? Ethan knelt in front of his daughter, who had been listening to the conversation with increasing seriousness. Lily, do you remember the spy game we sometimes play, where you have to get secret information from adults without them knowing you're doing it? Lily nodded enthusiastically. Like when I got the teacher to admit she had hidden candy in her desk. Exactly like that. But this game is very important and very dangerous. Do you think you can help us? To help the pretty lady? To save the pretty lady? Lily looked at Ava with determination. Yes, Dad, I can do it. The plan they improvised was risky and depended completely on Lily's natural intelligence and David's arrogance. Lily would go to Ava's penthouse that afternoon, supposedly to say goodbye before the trip to Switzerland. She would carry a small recording device that Chloe had gotten, and she would use her natural skills to ask innocent questions that could lead David to reveal his true motivations. What if he suspects something? Ava asked. David considers Lily completely insignificant, Ethan replied. To him, she's just the janitor's daughter. He won't guard his words in front of an 8-year-old girl. That afternoon, Lily arrived at the penthouse accompanied by Ethan, who stayed in the lobby while his daughter went up. The plan required him to maintain the legal distance, but he was prepared to break any law if his daughter was in danger. Hello, Mr. Vega, Lily said with her most innocent smile when she found David in Ava's study. I've come to say goodbye to the pretty lady before she goes on her trip. David barely looked at her. Your father should know better than to send you here, especially now. Why especially now? Lily asked, discreetly activating the recording device hidden in her small backpack. Because tomorrow, Ava is finally going to receive the treatment she needs to accept her condition permanently. What do you mean permanently? David turned to her and for the first time seemed to truly see her. Why would a little girl be interested in complicated medical matters? Because my dad taught me that understanding things helps you not be afraid of them, Lily replied honestly. David smiled, and there was something cruel in that smile. Your father has filled your head with a lot of silly ideas, hasn't he? Like the idea that Ava could walk again. But I was able to walk again, Lily said. The doctors said I never could, but my dad didn't believe them. Your case was different. David moved closer, and Lily could feel a dangerous energy emanating from him. Your father took advantage of desperate hopes to make it seem like he had achieved a miracle. But true miracles don't exist, little girl. There's only reality, and the reality is that Ava will never walk again. How can you be so sure? Because I've made sure of it, David replied, and then stopped abruptly, as if he had just realized what he had said. Lily, with the instinctive wisdom of children, pressed gently. You made sure how? David studied her carefully. Why are you asking so many questions? Because I want to understand why you don't want the pretty lady to get better. My dad says that when someone doesn't want another person to be happy, it's because they aren't happy themselves. Your father says a lot of things. David turned away, clearly agitated. But your father doesn't understand the real world. In the real world, sometimes we have to protect people from their own illusions, and sometimes that protection requires firm measures. What kind of measures? David turned to her with eyes that no longer held any warmth. The kind of measures a little girl shouldn't know about. Just then, Ava entered the study, and the tension in the room was palpable. Lily, is it time for you to go? Ava asked, immediately noticing the awkwardness of the situation. Yes, Lily replied, running to her for a hug. As she hugged her, she whispered almost inaudibly, "I got it." That night, when they listened to the recording, they had clear evidence of David's intentions, although not a complete confession of his specific crimes. But combined with Chloe's financial evidence and the medical reports from the American doctors, they had enough to stop him. "The problem," Chloe said, "is that we need time for the authorities to process all this information. And David plans to take you on that plane tomorrow night." "Then we won't go to the airport," Ava said. "If you don't show up," Ethan replied, "he'll know that we know everything, and we don't know how far he's willing to go when he's desperate. What do you suggest?" Ethan took her hands, and she could see a fierce resolution in his eyes. "I suggest we go to the airport, but not to board that plane, to end this once and for all. Ethan, it's too dangerous." "Ava," he said softly, "all of this has been dangerous from the beginning, but now we have something he didn't expect us to have." "What?" "The truth. And whenever someone fights with the truth on their side, they have a chance to win, no matter how powerful their opponent." Lily, who had been listening from the kitchen, approached them. "Dad, are we going to defeat the bad man tomorrow?" Ethan hugged her. "Yes, little one. Tomorrow we're going to prove that the good guys really can win, even when things seem impossible." As they prepared for the final confrontation, none of them knew that David had begun to suspect their plan, and that he had taken measures they would only find out about when it was already too late to change the course of events. The darkest night was about to give way to dawn, but before dawn, they would have to survive the most dangerous storm of their lives. Chapter 6. The international airport had never felt so menacing as it did on that October night. At 8:30 p.m., Ava arrived in her wheelchair, accompanied by David, who radiated barely contained satisfaction. He didn't know that in the adjoining terminal, Ethan, Chloe, and Lily were preparing for the most important confrontation of their lives. "I'm so proud of you," David said, as he pushed Ava's chair toward the check-in area. "I know this decision hasn't been easy, but it's the right one." Ava had stopped taking her medications 2 days ago, and she could already feel small sensations returning to her legs. She carefully maintained her neutral expression. "I just want it all to be over, David. I'm tired of fighting the inevitable." "Soon you won't have to fight anything ever again," he replied, and there was something final in his tone that put her on high alert. While they waited in the check-in line, David received a call. "Excuse me for a moment, my dear." He stepped away to talk privately, but Ava could hear fragments of the conversation. "Yes, doctor. Everything is proceeding as planned. No, she doesn't suspect anything. Permanent and irreversible, exactly as we discussed." Ava's heart sped up. This call confirmed her worst fears about what really awaited her in Switzerland. Just then, she saw Lily casually approaching from the shopping area, carrying a balloon she had bought as an excuse to be there. The girl made eye contact and nodded almost imperceptibly. Everyone was in position. When David returned, his demeanor had changed. There was a nervous energy about him that Ava hadn't seen before. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Perfectly fine," he replied, but his eyes didn't match his words. "Ava, there's something I need to tell you before we board." "What is it?" David knelt in front of her chair, taking her hands in a way that felt more like a trap than an affectionate gesture. "For these 2 years I've done everything I could to protect you. Sometimes that protection has required difficult decisions." "What kind of decisions?" "Decisions about your medical treatment, about the people who could negatively influence you, about the options that were truly best for you versus the ones you thought you wanted." Ava felt a shiver. "David, what are you trying to tell me?" "I'm telling you that everything I've done has been out of love, even when you had to be protected from your own hope." Just then, Chloe appeared from another direction, pretending to be a casual passenger, but positioning herself within listening range. She had a recording device activated in her bag. "Protected how?" Ava pressed. David looked around nervously, then leaned in closer. "The medications you've been taking haven't just been for pain. They've been to ensure you didn't have false relapses of hope." False relapses? Small sensations that could make you believe you were getting better when it wasn't true. It was better to keep those sensations suppressed than to let you suffer repeated disappointments. Ava felt as if she had just received a murder confession. "David, have you been intentionally drugging me to keep me paralyzed?" "I've been protecting you from false hope," he corrected, his voice becoming more defensive. "And I've also been protecting you from people who would take advantage of your vulnerability for their own ends. Like Ethan. Especially like Ethan," David exploded, his mask finally falling completely. "That man saw a golden opportunity when he met you. A rich, desperate woman perfect for his scamming schemes. Ethan never asked me for money." "Because he's smarter than that," David exploded. "He knew that if he made you believe you could walk again, you would give him anything." "Everything? Like you've done?" Ava asked quietly. David stopped abruptly. What do you mean by that? I mean that for 2 years you've had complete access to my fortune. You've made every decision about my money, my life, my future. Isn't that exactly what you're accusing Ethan of wanting to do? That's completely different. David stepped closer, his face showing a rage he no longer tried to hide. I have never lied to you about your chances of recovery. No, you've just lied to me about everything else. Just then Ethan appeared from behind a column. He'd been listening to every word, and his expression was one of controlled fury. David Vega, he said with a voice that cut the air like a knife. I think it's time for you to have an honest conversation. David turned, his face paling at the sight of Ethan. What are you doing here? There's a restraining order. Which was obtained under false pretenses, Chloe interrupted, stepping closer and showing her press ID. Mr. Vega, I'm Chloe Peterson from the New York Times. I've been investigating your financial activities for the past 3 weeks. I don't know what you're talking about. David looked around, clearly looking for an escape route. We're talking about $12 million siphoned from Miss Jenkins' charitable foundations, Chloe continued. We're talking about bribing doctors to maintain false diagnoses. We're talking about medications administered without informed consent to suppress natural recovery. That's ridiculous. We're talking about a clinic in Switzerland that specializes in irreversible procedures to create permanent dependency. Ethan stepped closer, and David instinctively backed away. How you can't prove any of that? Lily materialized next to her father, looking at David with a seriousness that was unsettling in someone so young. Mr. Vega, do you remember when you told me yesterday that you had made sure the pretty lady would never walk again? David looked at the girl with growing horror. You were recording? I'm very good at playing spies, Lily replied simply. This is all a trap. David turned to Ava in desperation. Ava, you have to believe me. Everything I've done has been to protect you. These people are trying to manipulate you. David, Ava interrupted him, and there was a calmness in her voice he hadn't heard in 2 years. There's something I need to show you. Slowly, using her arm muscles and the small sensations that had returned to her legs, Ava managed to slightly lift both feet off the footrest of her wheelchair. The silence that followed was deafening. This is what's possible, Ava said, lowering her feet again, when someone truly loves you instead of controlling you. David looked at her with an expression that mixed shock, betrayal, and something that looked dangerously like madness. That's impossible. The doctors confirmed. The doctors you bribed, Ethan corrected. The independent specialists who evaluated her this week confirmed that she has a 70% chance of significant recovery. No, David began to back away. No, this can't be happening. I control the situation. I have the power. Not anymore, said a new voice behind him. Everyone turned to see Detective Joe Ramirez of the Federal Police, accompanied by 2 uniformed officers. Chloe had been in contact with the authorities all week, and they had arrived just in time. David Vega, the detective continued, you are under arrest for fraud, embezzlement, and administration of controlled substances without consent. As they handcuffed David, he looked at Ava with a mixture of obsessive love and hatred. This isn't over, he told her. Without me, you can't survive in the real world. David, Ava replied with a serenity that surprised her. With you, I wasn't living at all. 6 months later, Ava Jenkins took her first independent steps in the same park where she had met Lily. They weren't perfect steps. She required a cane and still had days when she needed her wheelchair, but they were her steps, taken of her own free will toward her own freedom. Ethan and Lily were there, of course. Lily ran to her when she reached the end of the path, shouting with joy. Ethan was waiting for her with a smile that was worth more than all the fortune she had recovered from David's manipulations. How does it feel? Ethan asked, taking her free hand. It feels like waking up after a very long dream, Ava replied, like remembering who I really am. And who are you really? Lily asked, hanging on Ava's arm. Ava looked at this family she had come to love more than her own blood, at this man who had risked everything to remind her that miracles were possible, at this girl who had shown that bravery has no age. I'm someone who learned that true power isn't in controlling others, she finally said, but in helping them find their own strength. Ethan kissed her then, while Lily clapped, and parkgoers stopped to watch this small celebration of human triumph. And in that kiss was all the promise of a future built not on dependence or control, but on true love and mutual freedom. A year later, Ava and Ethan were married in a small ceremony in the same church where she had practiced her exercises in secret. Lily was the maid of honor, and during the ceremony, when they asked if anyone had any objections to the marriage, Lily stood up and said, "I have something to say." Everyone turned to her, and with the seriousness that only children can achieve, she declared, I think they're going to be very happy because they help each other be brave. And she was right. Ava never regained 100% of her mobility, but she regained something much more valuable, the ability to decide for herself what kind of life she wanted to live. Ethan found not only love, but also a renewed purpose, establishing a rehab center that combined traditional medicine with therapies of hope. And Lily grew up knowing she had participated in a true miracle, not the miracle of making someone walk again, but the miracle of helping someone remember they deserved to be free. David was sentenced to 15 years in prison. In one of the last hearings, when Ava testified about the impact of his actions, she said something that surprised everyone. "I am not testifying for revenge. I am testifying so that other people know that no matter how lost they feel, no matter how controlled their lives have been, there is always hope for liberation. There is always someone willing to help them remember their own strength." After the trial, Ethan asked her why she had been so compassionate in her testimony. "Because," Ava replied, "revenge would have kept me connected to him. Compassion set me completely free." And so, a story that began with despair and control ended with hope and freedom. A woman who had lost the ability to walk found something even more valuable, the ability to fly. In true love, after all, it's not about completing someone else. It's about helping them complete themselves. At the end of this story of transformation and hope, reflect, what would happen in your life if you let go of the fear of failure and dared to believe that the changes you desire are truly possible? Tell me what miracle you are ready to create in your own life, writing from where you are at this moment of renewed hope. The end. Because true miracles don't change external circumstances. True miracles change the heart that looks at those circumstances and discovers that it always had the power to fly.